And we have just heard that apparently Trump is finished speaking and that Merchan, the Judge Merchan, is starting the sentencing right now.
And in wrapping up, Trump said that this is a great embarrassment to the state of New York. And then Jonathan pointed out this idea that Michael Colangelo left his position as a deputy or assistant attorney general at the Department of Justice to take on the mantle of a humble state prosecutor for this case. I mean, that was something that a lot of people said, well, that draws a direct connection between what's going on in New York City and what's going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What do you think?
Well, it is interesting that in these final remarks, Trump is opening up about many of these issues. He's raised some of these themes before, but he was also under a gag order, something that many of us felt was excessive. You had this acting New York justice in Manhattan effectively controlling the leading candidate for the presidency on a subject that was important to many voters. Many voters saw what Merchan did in his courtroom as raw lawfare and saw these types of cross-pollination that you just raised, John, as evidence of that. And I think that, in my view, that's the verdict that is going to be unassailable here. I don't think this case is likely to be upheld. I hope it will not be. But I think that the verdict on the New York court system is going to really stand the test of time. This was where the New York court system failed in a spectacular fashion, allowed people like Bragg, Attorney General James, and others to weaponize their system. It's going to take years for New York to regain a sense of legitimacy in the eyes of many citizens, including many business people who look at this and say, but for the grace of God go I. But the one thing that I think that Trump can take some solace in is that he can now appeal this case in whole. And as Andy was talking about, there are some just glaring, in my views, reversible errors. I agree with Andy that the one that takes my breath away, even beyond the fact that I think this is a made-up criminal case with a made-up crime, is that the judge did not require the jury to unanimously agree on what happened. That is, in order to zap that dead misdemeanor into life, they needed this secondary crime. What was Trump trying to hide? What was he trying to achieve? Merchan just said, come up with anything. It doesn't matter. You just choose on this menu, and you don't even have to tell us what you actually think happened in this case. That should be outrageous to everyone, including critics. And, you know, I have to give credit to, you know, over at CNN, their senior analyst said this was unprecedented, absurd. The New York senator from New Jersey recently used stronger language to condemn this case. Those are voices from the left that I want to give credit to. But where the silence, the deafening silence, is coming from the New York legal system itself. And that's where I think many of us are rather shocked that we ever got to this point to see this sentence come down in a case that should never have been brought.
Andy, Todd Blanche is the defense attorney with Trump today. He's going to be starting at the Justice Department on January 20th. Right. That is not a Senate-confirmed position, right?
No, it is.
No, it is. So he'll have to be Senate-confirmed, so he's probably not going to talk too much outside of this until then. But can you project a little bit ahead? I mean, if they're saying what they're saying about the New York system and also about the overall court proceedings in America and people not having confidence, what can or should or do you anticipate Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi might do there?
Well, I think the first flashpoint, Dana, and Trey and I talked about this before we came in, is probably the Mangione case, the terrible homicide case that we had in New York. Very interesting, not to get too much into the weeds about this, but in most of the country, there's no problem if the state prosecutes someone having a separate federal prosecution because of what we call dual sovereignty. But in New York, it doesn't work that way. In New York, they have what they call equitable double jeopardy in the state constitution. And as a practical matter, what that always meant when I was a federal prosecutor here, we could always win the turf battles. Because if we go first, the state can't go at all. They're basically jeopardied out, as we used to say. So I thought it was interesting that the Biden Justice Department evidently made a deal with Bragg that New York could go first on Mangione, and then the feds would go. I would be very surprised if the Trump Justice Department feels like they have to honor that deal.
All right. Anything
Yeah.
on that, Trey?
I hate to use the word collusion, but Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, if they're all confirmed, will find out whether or not there was collusion between Merrick Garland and Alvin Bragg to bring this case in state court. They'll have all the paperwork, all the paper trail. So if there was collusion, we'll know about it in about 3 months.
All right, so more notes from inside the court from our Kerry Urban. Judge Merchan, in his preamble to announcing the sentence, says the Trump trial was no different than all of the other criminal trials in the building. Merchan attempting to create equivalency between Trump and ordinary criminals while acknowledging the fact that he won the presidency and how it is, in fact, different. Andy, you want to tackle that one, that the Trump case is no different than any other case that comes into his courtroom?
Well, I think the Trump case is different because the defendant is in the courtroom. In Alvin Bragg's New York, that doesn't often happen. We have criminals who commit very serious crimes here who never actually get charged and never find their way into the courtroom. When they get into one of Alvin Bragg's courtrooms, if they start out with a felony, if it gets down to a misdemeanor, that's actually lucky for the public. Very often, there's not even misdemeanor dispositions. I just think it's like living in an alternative universe, listening to these guys. If you actually spend time in New York, if you grew up in New York like I did, and you saw the plummeting of crime from the 90s for the 25 years after that, which was accomplished by actual prosecution of cases, and then you have a district attorney who comes in with what he called a day one memo, which basically said there's a new regime in town and what we're going to try as prosecutors is non-prosecution. And that's pretty much what criminals get in New York unless their name is Donald Trump.
Wanted to ask you about something, Trey, which is the amount of taxpayer dollars that has gone forward in this prosecution, plus all of the legal costs for the defendant, who is the president-elect.
And all the other cases that were not able to be brought to trial because they wasted time on this one. All the sex assault victims, the robbery victims. Court time is precious. It is a precious resource. To waste this time on a case where even the prosecution agrees you should not spend a minute. So if Juan Merchan says this case was not handled any differently, that just tells me there are lots of bad trials going on in New York. One other point on appeal, when I was in the courtroom, the expert, Trump's expert, was not even allowed to testify. And I literally, Dana, heard the same question asked from the defense and the prosecution with different rulings. So if Juan Merchan says that he did this like he did every other case, then he's a bad judge in every other case because the rulings were different depending on who did the objecting.
Yeah. So let me put this question to you, Professor Turley, because there seems to be a consensus among the three of you that there is plenty of potentially reversible error that was committed during the Trump trial. Yet in the New York court system, Trump has pretty much gotten locked out of all of his petitions to either have the case thrown out or delayed or sentencing delayed or whatever. What makes you believe that he could prevail on appeal, given his track record with the New York court system, which a lot of people believe is politically allied against him?
Well, very few people have high expectations at this point for the New York legal system, and it hurts me to say that because I've had a great respect for that system for many years, as has many others. But there's also a problem in these interlocutory appeals. They kept on taking these three-point shots mid-trial, shortly after the verdict. Those are always disfavored. And so the chances of prevailing are not high. You have a better chance once the case itself has been appealed, but also eventually this will go to the Supreme Court. And the key is escaping the vortex that is the New York court system.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.